Morag is the new featured location in Marvel Snap. It's going to be showing up in 40% of your games from the 28th to the 29th of December. You can't play your first card here each turn. So on turn 1, you're not going to be able to play anything into Morag, but on turn 2, you could play your Korg, for example, into a different location, and then your Rocket Raccoon into Morag. I've built 10 of the very best decks. I've got a reputation for creative, competitive decks, so these are going to be of the very highest quality, and I've also got a bunch of cards which are just going to be really good in this location. If you do find this helpful, please leave a like and a comment. It really will help out the channel. Claw is a great example of a good card into this location, as long as the location isn't on the far left, because you can play Claw and then bump those stats into the right. Mr. Fantastic, Blue Marvel, Kazar, and Onslaught are also doing similar things. Doctor Doom is another style of card which is going to be great into Morag, as well as Ultron, Squirrel Girl, Mysterio, Arnim Zola, and Leader, being able to get cards into that location without actually playing. It'll be interesting to see how Mysterio works exactly with this location, if you can actually get an illusion in there or if it just won't let you. And while the illusion's not going to be any points in a deck like Patriot, or if you carnage that lane later on, I still wanted to mention Mysterio. Vision, any card you can move in there is going to be great. Captain Marvel, Nightcrawler, Iron Fist, and Heimdall as well. Of course, if it is the far right location, Heimdall and Iron Fist are going to have more of a tricky time. Sandman, the card I'm most excited to play. We've got a Juicer Sandman deck, which is being massively slept on. I think it's one of the strongest decks in the game right now, and I think Sandman's time to shine is really going to be this next couple of days. I think this is going to be the top meta deck for the next couple of days. Polaris, she is going to be moving an opposing 1 or 2 cost card to this location, so you can move your opponent's cards out of the location, and you can also do that with Magneto, Aero, and potentially Juggernaut as well. Sera is going to be a nice option because you can just play a bunch of cards on the final turn, so you're going to be able to sneak some points into the location on turn number 6. Mr. Negative doing similar things because you can just play so many cards of Mr. Negative in the final turn. That's going to be a nice way to get lots of points in there. Lockjaw, not so much himself, more the fact that in a Lockjaw deck you're going to be playing cards like Wasp, cards like maybe Thor's Hammer, and that means that you're going to be able to play multiple cards per turn and therefore get some big stats into the location. Thanos, also worth a mention for similar reasons, because you have so many of the cheap Infinity Stones, and we have got a Thanos deck as well in here. Here's the first deck. It's a Kingpin deck. This is one of the decks that I think is going to be strongest. This list is what I used to get to Infinite this season. With one exception, I wasn't playing Polaris. I had something else in there. Titania also can easily be replaced by any 1-cost card of your choice. She's a pull 4 card. This deck's going to be really good because you have Magneto, Polaris to be pulling cards out of the location. Kingpin can be a great way to, if you can have that Kingpin and then pull them into the Kingpin lane on the final turn, that can be really nice. And you just get lots of control with cards like Storm and Jug as well. So Nightcrawler, Iron Fist also can sneak points into that location. Spider-Man, Miles Morales. It's just a really fun deck, and it's going to be a banger tomorrow. Again, I got to Infinite with it this season. If you want to see the full video of this deck, it's on my channel, so make sure you check that out. Up next, we have the deck that I alluded to earlier, which is the Sandman. I'm not going to call it a Metabreaker, but mate, this is a juicer of a deck. You will have seen a lot of these decks with Shuri, Red Skull, Taskmaster doing the rounds, and in my opinion, this is by far the strongest and most optimized way of playing these cards. If you don't have Shuri, don't be put off completely by this list. You can replace Shuri with Jessica Jones and pretty much play all the same cards. Maybe you want to replace Taskmaster for an Arnim Zola, I would imagine. But again, Taskmaster, far from the most important card either. The most important cards with this, the gist of it is you want to be playing like Ebony Maw, Lizard, Maximus early for just getting some early board presence. Ideally, we're going to play Sandman on turn 3. We do that by playing Psylocke on turn 2. If you don't have Psylocke, I do think that this deck is a lot weaker. So Psylocke, definitely the key card with Sandman decks, because that's going to let you play Sandman on turn number 3. On turn 4, we can Shuri. On turn 5, we get a 30-point Red Skull. And then on turn 6, we can play a 30-point Taskmaster. But also with Sandman, Captain Marvel and Doctor Doom are absolute MVPs. It is very difficult to lose if you've got a Captain Marvel and Doctor Doom. Leader, definitely a big counter to this deck. You could also whack a Leader of your own in here. Don't replace the America Chavez. She's increasing the odds of us drawing our Psylocke and our Sandman on curve. Mr. Fantastic goes in there instead of Arnim Zola because he's just a nice early curve. One thing you can definitely struggle with Sandman decks is if you don't have, for example, a turn 3, if you end up skipping turn 3 and then play Sandman, you've got some catching up to do. So instead of having that extra 6 cost card, just having that nice early curve. And Mr. Fantastic putting points into all 3 lanes in a Sandman deck, really, really nice. I think this is the best deck for the next couple of days. Up next, we have Sera Surfer. Sera, of course, just working well with this. Polaris being a good option. I also think Killmonger is going to be a very solid choice for the next few days because a lot of people are going to be playing Khazar decks with lots of 1-drops, and therefore Killmonger is just going to be absolutely cleaning up. This is, in my opinion, the best way to play the Silver Surfer. A lot of you are going to be like, why the heck is America Chavez in this deck? A lot of you will know she's my favourite card in the game. She's increasing the odds of us drawing Storm on turn 3, Goose on turn 2. Also, 1 in around 16 games, she's going to mean that we draw Sera on turn 5 instead of on turn 6. And a lot of the time, okay, she's going to feel like she's blocking you from drawing your Silver Surfer, for example. But the maths checks out around 1 in 44 games is when America Chavez actually stops you drawing that Silver Surfer. Psychologically, it does feel worse. But the logic of Chavez is that you should always have enough 3-cost cards to be playing with this deck. You just get that little bit more flexibility by replacing her with another 3-drop, but she's improving the consistency of the deck significantly. Nova's the new addition to these decks, which I quite like because you're already playing Killmonger. A lot of people do play Forge instead, but often you have enough points to win the Brood lane anyway, so I do think the Forge is somewhat redundant because it's very lackluster when you don't hit the Brood, and often the points on the Brood are pretty unimportant because the Brood is your strongest lane. This is the best way of playing this deck. You could play around with the 3s a little bit. I tend to not like Juggernaut so much. But I think it also does make sense with this location. So yeah, definitely play around the 3s. Juggernaut, the main card that I'm not convinced by, but he's definitely one of the more solid options, that's for sure. Bishop also, I know a lot of people like. I'm not a massive fan of Bishop personally in this deck. But yeah, play around with the 3-drops if you would like to. And obviously if you don't have any of those, Brood being the most important. But yeah, just have a little play around. Up next, we have Negative Surfer now. I've never played this deck. This is one of the decks that I haven't built myself. I think I actually took this, not off Jeff, I took this off someone, and I replaced maybe a card or two. Pretty self-explanatory. It's Mr. Negative Silver Surfer. You want to go Psylocke into Mr. Negative. If you have Psylocke into Mr. Negative, you should be snapping before you play the Psylocke because you just get so many points when these combos work out. Magic's in there to increase the odds of you drawing some Mr. Negative combo cards. Sera is in there as well to just really surprise your opponent with big value on the last turn. And of course, you can sneak lots of points into the featured location on the final turn. Should be a very good deck. Mr. Negative decks, you can lose a lot of games when you don't draw Mr. Negative, but when you draw Mr. Negative, there's no better deck at winning 8 cubes. It's my least favorite deck in the game for that very reason. Not because it's bad, because I always lose to it, and it triggers me. So, yeah. One day I'll actually play some of this myself. Here's the other version of Mr. Negative. Again, I think I took this list off of Jeff. I just changed a card or two. I think I just put Arnim Zola in instead of Mojo he was playing, and I just put a Zola in because it's just an extra card, which can cost nothing. Pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you've got Psylocke into Mr. Negative, you should be snapping before you play the Psylocke. Absolutely, absolutely. That is going to be really, really important to maximize your cube gain. Up next, we have Bounce Movement. Listen, I wouldn't recommend playing this because if the featured location spawns on the right, you're going to have a really bloody difficult time getting any stats in there. But if it's on the left or the middle, then this deck should be really good. And I do love movement decks. A lot of you will know this is the strongest movement deck in the game. I did post a full video on this list recently. Beast, a lot of you would be wondering why that's in there. You can play Iron Fist, Human Torch, and then play Beast on both of those cards to put them back into your hand, and then you can repeat them again. You can also bounce the Forge back, so you can really buff up your Human Torch a bunch of times. It's also very nice on to cards like Doctor Strange and Cloak, where you get to reuse their abilities. America Chavez is in there again because she's increasing the odds of us drawing our combo cards. You might notice that I don't play her in Mr. Negative. That's because you don't want to be drawing her when you've got the Mr. Negative ability. This is one of the few decks she is actually actively very, very bad in, but in this deck she's a no-brainer, particularly because some games you don't want a Heimdall on the final turn. Your opponent's going to see the Heimdall coming, and you actually just want to play Chavez. This is one of the highest skill ceiling decks in the game, and even if you play it perfectly, it's not the strongest, but I do think movement is pretty underrated, and I had to give it a little honorable mention in here. Lockjaw up next. This is my Lockjaw deck. I actually play Shuri instead of Spider-Man, so if you do have Shuri, you want to slot her in instead of Spider-Man here. Spider-Man, the main card that I don't love either. You could definitely play around with this if there's a different 4-cost card that you like. You could even risk playing Shang-Chi, to be honest. Often you're going to be winning your Lockjaw lane anyway. But this one makes sense, as mentioned before, because you can play your Wasp into your Lockjaw lane, and then you might play your Vision into a different lane. You've also got the Vision to move in there, the Doctor Doom to get points in there. It should just be a very solid deck. Lockjaw Thanos up next. This is not a deck I'm going to put my name on. I did build it myself. I don't have Thanos, so I've never played it. You could go Jane Foster Thor if you've got it, but like honestly, if you've got Thanos, just play the Thanos deck, which you usually play, and you should be sweet. I would imagine that Lockjaw is probably the best way of playing Thanos. You definitely want a lot of these big juicer cards, but playing Dracula and Iron Man, for example, is a little bit dodgy, so please don't be afraid to experiment with this one and see what works for you. Again, if I had Shuri, I'd definitely put Shuri in here instead of Spider-Man or Dracula, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know. I obviously don't have the cards, so yeah. Alright, finally, last but certainly not least, we have Pool 1 and Pool 2 decks. For Pool 1, I just went for the same old usual Kazoo. It's literally the same deck that I always post on these Pool 1 guides. Sometimes I try and mix it up. The Pool 2 one is quite spicy, but it's just a no-brainer. It synergizes very well with the featured location. And finally, last but certainly not least, we have a very spicy-looking Pool 2 list. Not necessarily the best one you can play in Pool 2. You can play Vision in Pool 2. That's very good. I just wanted to highlight some kind of claw deck. And yeah, this just seemed like the best approach. We've got Onslaught and Spectrum in there. The idea with this one is that we're only going to play like 8 cards. We don't want to play anything into the Morag location. We can get stats in there with Mr. Fantastic, with Claw, and then we've got the Warpath with Onslaught as well, which is going to be getting +4 points if we leave a location empty. And obviously with Onslaught, we can really be getting even more points there. So it's just an interesting deck, not the typical one, and one I wanted to share. You can definitely play some other Pool 2 decks, just like the standard things. I think like Heimdall Bamboozle would be really good, where you just play cards like Storm and Vision, and then you have a random Heimdall in there to move all the cards to the left on the last turn if you so wish. That's also a nice option. Video of that on my channel as well. But yeah, that is all the decks for the new featured location Morag and all the best combo cards. I really hope you guys enjoyed the effort that went into this video. I spent ages building these decks and ages setting up the slideshow to try and make this as smooth as possible. If you did enjoy it, and please do like it. And the key word, if you watch this far, is Sandman. Because, mate, Sandman, this card is absolutely popping off the next couple of days. Mark my words. If, again, you don't watch me on Twitch, I'm streaming every single day at around 8 AM UK time. So do check me out over there. Hopefully YouTube live streams coming soon as well. Nice one.